Welcome to Deep Dive number 13. You know what they say about the number 13, right? Maybe unlucky for some, but definitely our lucky number, because today we're trekking into one of the most bone-chilling unsolved mysteries of all time, the Dyatlov Pass incident.
And you couldn't have picked a better episode number for this one. 9 experienced hikers vanish in the Ural Mountains back in 1959, their tent found ripped apart from the inside, bodies scattered, some with injuries so bizarre they defy explanation.
Right. We're talking missing eyes, crushed ribs, even tongues ripped out. Some say it was an avalanche gone wrong. Others whisper about secret government experiments. And, of course, you've got your Yeti enthusiasts lurking in the shadows.
I have to admit, even I get goosebumps thinking about this case. But before we jump to any conclusions, let's set the stage. It's 1959, the height of the Cold War, and a group of 10 young hikers from the Ural Polytechnical Institute set off on a challenging winter expedition.
Yeah, led by the intrepid Igor Dyatlov. He was a seasoned hiker. They were prepared for the harsh conditions. And everything seemed to be going smoothly. Until it wasn't. But you know what really gets me is this. One of the hikers, Yuri, actually turned back early because he got sick.
Talk about dodging a bullet. Or maybe a Yeti's icy breath.
Okay, cool. I know you're skeptical, but imagine the what-ifs he must have lived with for the rest of his life. He could have been the one taking those creepy photos, or maybe he would have been the key to solving the whole mystery.
Well, instead we're left with the diaries and memories of the 9 who continued on. Like Lyudmila Dubinina, tough as nails, even continued hiking after being accidentally shot on a previous trip. Or Zinaida Kolmogorova, who carefully documented their journey, anxieties and all.
Right, like, hey, I'm a little worried about freezing to death in the wilderness, but at least I've got my diary.
Yeah.
Seriously, though, their stories make this whole thing even more real. You know, these were real people with dreams, fears, and maybe even a little bit of wanderlust that led them to their doom.
Don't forget their quirks. We've got Yuri Doroshenko, our bear-fighting hero, who once chased off a bear with a small hammer. Then there's Yuri Krivonyshenko, the group's joker, who actually got arrested on the way to the expedition.
Wait, what? Arrested? Okay, I need details. This is gold.
Apparently, he charmed his way out of it, which seems to fit with his personality. But then you have Alexander Zolotaryov, the mysterious war veteran who joined last minute, significantly older than the rest of the group. Nobody really knew his story.
Okay, so we've got a bear fighter, a comedian, a war veteran with a secret past, and a bunch of other adventurous souls. What could possibly go wrong, right?
Famous last words. Because when a search party finally found their abandoned tent, things took a turn for the truly bizarre.
Right. The tent was slashed open from the inside like something was desperate to get out. Their belongings were strewn about, some still inside the tent, some scattered down the slope. Footprints led away into the freezing darkness. Some barefoot, some in socks, some with just one shoe.
It paints a picture of utter chaos and panic. Imagine being woken up in the dead of night by something, feeling the freezing wind and realizing you have to escape now.
See, this is where my conspiracy-loving mind kicks in. What could have terrified these experienced hikers so badly that they'd run out into a sub-zero blizzard half-dressed? I'm talking Yeti attack, alien abduction, maybe even a rogue Soviet experiment gone wrong.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We need to examine the evidence, the timeline, and the various theories, even if some of them sound like they belong in a sci-fi movie. But I promise you the truth is often stranger than fiction, and this case is a prime example.
Okay, you're right. Evidence first, then the wild speculation. So walk us through the discovery of the bodies. This is where things get really creepy, right?
Absolutely. It was a gruesome scene spread out over weeks in different locations as the snow slowly melted. First, they found Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonyshenko near a cedar tree about a mile from the tent, both with signs of hypothermia and strange injuries.
Didn't one of them have a self-inflicted bite mark? What does that tell you about the level of desperation they were facing?
It's a chilling detail for sure, but remember, hypothermia can have some strange effects on the mind and body.
Okay,
right.
True. But 2 down, 7 to go. What about the others?
The search continued, and as the snow melted further, they found the bodies of Igor Dyatlov Rustam Slobodin and Zinaida Kolmogorova a bit further down the slope closer to the tent. It seemed like they were trying to make their way back, maybe for supplies or shelter.
So even in their desperate state, they were still trying to survive, to think rationally. It makes you wonder what was going through their minds as they stumbled through the darkness.
And then weeks later, the final 4 bodies were discovered in a ravine much deeper in the woods near a makeshift snow shelter they had built. This is where things get really, really strange.
Okay, hit me with the spooky details. What kind of injuries are we talking about?
Some of the injuries found on the first group were consistent with hypothermia and a struggle in the harsh environment. but these last 4. They had massive internal injuries, crushed ribs, skull fractures. One even had their skull completely caved in. Injuries so severe they were initially compared to those you'd see in a car crash.
A car crash? Hold on, are we talking about a Yeti with a monster truck now?
Mhm.
Seriously. What could have caused that kind of damage in the middle of the wilderness?
That's the million-ruble question. The official explanation from the Soviet investigators was simply an unknown compelling force. Vague, right? Almost like they were trying to hide something.
Unknown compelling force. That sounds like code for, we have no clue, but we're not going to admit it. Classic cover-up, right? Maybe they accidentally launched a missile that went haywire and caused some kind of sonic boom that messed these poor hikers up. Or maybe it was a top-secret invisibility cloak test gone wrong.
Okay, let's rein in the conspiracy theories for a second and look at the more plausible but still unsettling possibilities. The location of the tent, for example, was on the slopes of Kolotsiakal, which translates to Dead Mountain. Not exactly a promising start.
Dead Mountain. Okay, that's just asking for trouble. It's like naming your boat the Titanic.
But
But seriously, what was wrong with the location?
it's known for harsh weather conditions and unpredictable terrain. They might have inadvertently set up camp in a spot prone to avalanches or sudden, powerful wind blasts.
So we're talking avalanche theory here. A wall of snow crashing down on them, forcing them to flee in terror. That could explain the tent damage and the panicked escape.
It's a popular theory, but there are some inconsistencies. Investigators didn't find any evidence of a large avalanche in the area. No debris field, no broken trees, no path of destruction you'd typically expect. Plus, remember, the ski pole they used for their makeshift camera stand. It was still standing upright in later photos. An avalanche would have surely wiped that out.
Okay, good point. But what about a smaller avalanche? Just enough to damage the tent and freak them out, but not enough to leave major traces. Maybe they overreacted thinking it was bigger than it actually was.
Possible, but it still doesn't explain those severe internal injuries, especially on the 4 found deeper in the woods. An avalanche wouldn't cause those kinds of specific localized injuries.
All right, so maybe it wasn't a classic avalanche. What about those weird wind blasts you mentioned? Could that have done it?
We're talking about a phenomenon called a katabatic wind. Imagine a river of super chilled air, denser than normal, flowing down the mountainside at incredible speeds. It can pack enough force to knock you off your feet and cause serious damage.
Okay, I'm picturing it. Like a supercharged, freezing hurricane funneling down the mountains, slamming into their tent with enough force to make them think the world was ending. But would that be enough to explain those crushed bones and internal injuries?
It's possible that a powerful katabatic wind could have contributed to their initial panic and flight from the tent, but it's unlikely to have caused those specific types of trauma.
All right, so we've ruled out the Yeti driving a monster truck and the invisible Soviet missile. What about those other theories we talked about? Could they have been attacked by the local Mansi people? Maybe it was some kind of ritualistic sacrifice gone wrong?
The Mansis were indigenous people who lived in that region, and there were initial suspicions of their involvement. But they have a long history of peaceful coexistence with outsiders, and investigators found no evidence to support this theory. No footprints other than the hikers, no signs of a struggle or confrontation, nothing.
Okay, so probably not angry locals with an axe to grind. But what about other human involvement? Do they stumble upon some kind of secret government operation, witness something they shouldn't have?
That's where the Cold War paranoia comes in. Some believe they might have stumbled upon a secret military testing site and were eliminated to protect whatever was going on up there. There were reports of strange lights in the sky around that time, which fueled speculation of secret weapons tests or
Alien spaceships. Come on. You know, I love a good conspiracy theory, but even I'm drawing the line at extraterrestrial interference in the Ural Mountains.
Okay, fair enough. But the reports of strange lights are intriguing, and they do tie into another theory surrounding Sasha Zolotaryov, the mysterious war veteran.
Okay, remind me what was up with him again. He was the older guy who joined last minute, right?
Exactly. He had a background shrouded in secrecy, and some believe he might have been a secret agent on a mission that went wrong.
A spy in the group. Okay, now we're talking. But why were the others killed? Were they caught in the crossfire?
It's a possibility, but there's no concrete evidence to support it. And it still wouldn't fully explain the nature of their injuries. Plus, wouldn't a professional spy clean up the mess, make it look like an accident? Leaving the bodies scattered around seems pretty sloppy for a covert operation.
Good point. It's
No.
like Spycraft 101. Don't leave your victims lying around for hikers to find. So if it wasn't an avalanche, angry locals, a government cover-up, or aliens, then what are we left with?
I think we need to shift our focus away from external forces and look more closely at the group themselves, their dynamics, and the psychological effects of their situation.
You're talking about the hypothermia angle again, right?
Yeah.
We know extreme cold can mess with your mind, but could it really explain those injuries?
Hypothermia can lead to confusion, disorientation, even paradoxical undressing, where people start taking their clothes off even though they're freezing. It's possible their behavior became erratic and unpredictable.
So maybe they weren't thinking clearly, they were panicking, making bad decisions. But could hypothermia cause someone to smash another person's skull in?
While hypothermia itself wouldn't directly cause that kind of trauma, it could certainly contribute to a heightened state of anxiety, fear, and even aggression.
Okay, I'm seeing where you're going with this. We've got extreme cold, limited visibility, maybe even some hallucinations. And let's not forget, they were probably exhausted, hungry, and stressed from the challenging conditions.
Exactly. It creates a perfect storm for conflict and irrational behavior. Remember those diary entries hinting at tension within the group? Maybe it wasn't just innocent bickering. Maybe it escalated into something more serious.
So you're thinking, a fight? Maybe they turned on each other? I mean, it sounds crazy, but desperate people do desperate things.
It's a dark possibility, but one we can't ignore. The combination of hypothermia, exhaustion, and interpersonal conflict could have led to a tragic chain of events, starting with a damaged tent and ending with those horrific injuries.
Hold on, there's one thing that doesn't quite fit. If they were fighting each other, why did they try to build a fire and a shelter? Why did they try to help each other? It seems like they were still trying to survive as a group, even in their desperate state.
That's the truly heartbreaking part of this story. Even in the face of unimaginable fear and suffering, they still showed signs of compassion, of trying to care for one another. It makes you wonder what really happened in those final moments, what led to those final fatal injuries.
All right, we've gone deep into the evidence, explored the theories, from the plausible to the downright wacky. But after all this, are we any closer to solving the mystery of the Dyatlov Pass incident?
The truth is, we may never know for sure what happened that night on Dead Mountain.
So after all this, are we left with more questions than answers?
We are, and that's part of what makes this case so fascinating. It challenges us to think critically, to consider different perspectives, and to accept that sometimes the most compelling mysteries are the ones that remain unsolved.
Okay, deep divers, we're back.
Right.
And I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything we've uncovered about this Dyatlov Pass incident. I mean, we've got a shredded tent and bizarre injuries and enough theories to fuel a dozen conspiracy documentaries.
It's a case that really captures the imagination, doesn't it? A story that reminds us that even in our modern world, there are still mysteries that defy easy explanation.
Absolutely. It's like a real-life horror movie, but without the cheesy jump scares. And you know me, I'm a sucker for a good, spooky story. But I also have to admit, this one's got me feeling a little unsettled.
It's understandable. I mean, the details are unsettling, to say the least. And the lack of, definitive answers can be frustrating for anyone, especially those who crave logic and order.
Speaking of logic, let's revisit some of the more rational explanations we discussed. We talked about hypothermia and how it can cause confusion, disorientation, even make people do crazy things like rip their clothes off in freezing temperatures.
Right, paradoxical undressing. It's a strange but documented phenomenon that can occur in severe cases of hypothermia.
So maybe they were already experiencing some level of hypothermia when whatever happened that night forced them to flee the tent. It's possible they weren't thinking clearly, their bodies were shutting down, and they made decisions that ultimately led to their deaths.
It's certainly a factor we have to consider. Hypothermia could have impaired their judgment, made them more susceptible to panic, and even contributed to some of their injuries.
But it still doesn't explain those really severe injuries, like the crushed ribs and skull fractures. Those seem to require some kind of external force.
Exactly. Which brings us back to the possibility of a conflict within the group. Remember those diary entries hinting at tension, maybe even some romantic rivalry? What if it escalated, maybe fueled by fear exhaustion and the effects of hypothermia?
Okay, I'm picturing it. They're trapped in this freezing wasteland. Tensions are high, and suddenly, boom, something terrifying happens. Maybe that katabatic wind we talked about slams into their tent, Or maybe they hear a strange sound, see something unexplainable in the darkness.
Panic sets in, they slash their way out of the tent, and in their disoriented state, they turn on each other.
It's dark, I know, but it would explain those more violent injuries. And maybe after the initial chaos, they realized what had happened and tried to help each other. That would explain the attempts to build a fire, the makeshift shelter.
It's a tragic scenario, but one that fits with many of the facts we have. A combination of natural forces, human error, and the unpredictable effects of extreme stress and hyperthermia.
A perfect storm of unfortunate circumstances. It makes you realize how fragile we are, how quickly things can go wrong, even for experienced adventurers who seem prepared for anything.
And it highlights the importance of not only physical preparedness, but also mental and emotional resilience when facing challenging situations.
Well said. But after all this, I'm still left with this nagging question. What was that initial trigger? What scared them so badly that they abandoned their shelter and ran into the darkness?
That's the ultimate mystery, isn't it? Was it a natural phenomenon we haven't considered? Was it a case of mistaken identity, a shadow in the darkness misinterpreted as a threat? Or was it something more unexplainable?
You know, I love a good paranormal theory, but even I'm leaning towards a more rational explanation in this case. Sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones we create in our own minds, fueled by fear and desperation.
I agree. But even without a definitive answer, the Dyatlov Pass incident serves as a chilling reminder of the power of nature, the limits of human understanding, and the enduring allure of the unknown.
Well, deep divers, we've reached the end of our trek into the chilling mystery of the Dyatlov Pass. We've examined the evidence, explored the theories, and maybe even sparked a few nightmares along the way.
But most importantly, we've engaged in critical thinking, challenged assumptions, and learned a little something about the enduring power of mystery.
So next time you're out in the wilderness,
Yeah.
remember the story of the Dyatlov Pass hikers. Be prepared, be aware, and maybe bring an extra flashlight or two. You never know what might be lurking out there in the darkness.
And keep those critical thinking skills sharp. Because as we've seen, the truth is often stranger and more fascinating than fiction.
Until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and stay safe out there, deep divers.